right, this is the session that we have been waiting for. This is what you signed up for, is to get to this. So we're going to dive in together. Remember the verse that we read at the very beginning together, where Jesus tells us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, and all of our mind. That really is the heart behind what we're doing here, is as we take in new ideas, new concepts, new wisdom, it's helping us to grow. So again, how much of this book do we need to read to gain the wisdom? This is a great book about entrepreneurship, about starting a company. Many of you have probably heard it before, the $100 Startup. I'm just going to use this as an example. And we're just going to flip through this together, and we're going to see how much of it we actually need in order to get the main concepts of the $100 Startup. So it starts with a prologue. Sometimes there's a foreword by another author. Do we need to read the foreword? Not really. That was written by somebody else at a different time after the book was already completed. It's literally not even a part of the books. It's just an endorsement. So you can skip over that. What about the preface or anything with like a Roman numeral? Like that starts here, and this is not actually a page number. It's the pre-page number. Honestly, in my mind, if it's not worth a page number, it's not worth my time. And by the way, the reason why they put Roman numerals instead of page numbers for a lot of those is most of the time it was actually written after the book was already completed. So the book is done. This is just additional material. So is it necessary to read additional material to get the main concepts? Of course not. It's basically it's basically a movie trailer. Any type of introduction or preface or anything before chapter 1, it's basically an overview. Here's what you're about to read. So before you watch a movie with your friends, do you watch the movie trailer? No, you don't need to. You can if you want to see what you're about to see, but you don't need to. You can just skip to chapter 1. And so here's what we're doing. We're on chapter 1 here. You are on a hunt for the most important information, and you're looking for clues. You're looking for any type of bolded statements, anything that the author is literally highlighting to say this is the most important thing. Sometimes, like in this case, it's literally at the top of page 1 right there. That is what this chapter is all about. And sometimes throughout a chapter, you'll have bolded points, you'll have bolded statements, and what's happening there is the author is letting you know these are the most important things I want you to write down. Like this is the highlights of it. A lot of times they'll even put an end of chapter summary, okay? So that is huge right there. You see that, the end of chapter summary? That's basically saying, here's the most important parts. I just summarized this 20-page chapter into 4 sentences. If you write anything down, these are the takeaways from that. If an author gives you end of chapter summaries or bolded points, sometimes they're like in the margin or they're highlighted or at the beginning or the end of the chapter, that's a gift. That is the author letting you know that this is the main stuff. This is the meat and potatoes. These are the main concepts. Everything else you can kind of fast forward, because this is what I want you to remember. You know, I was a pastor, a preacher. I have been for the past several years, and something that I learned is I can spend so much time preparing a sermon, a 35 minute sermon, where I might spend 10, 15 hours on a sermon, but I'm also realistic in knowing that a lot of the people that listen, they're going to forget a lot of it. The next day, they might not remember it. An hour later, they might not remember it. And so because of that, I wanted to come up with what are the 1 or 2 main points that if you're going to remember anything, remember this. And I would boil those down to 1 or 2 statements. I'd put those on the screen. I would highlight those. I'd say those more than once. And it was almost my way of saying, hey, listen, you got a lot going on. Just at least remember these 2 things. I hope you remember more. I hope that you take away more than just these 2 sentences, but remember these 2 things. That is what the author is doing here. And if the author does that for you already, which a lot of books in this day and age do that, that's a gift. Use that gift. Take those points, write them down, and then move on to the next chapter. If you have a book laid out that way, you could actually get through all the main concepts and the main wisdom of the book and write those down in about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, am I saying to move that quickly through a book? No. If you move that fast, you're probably not going to remember any of it. You need to spend a little bit more time with a book so that it resonates with you. It's kind of like in high school, if you ever had to cram for some type of book report or a test, and what do? You get the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes. And so you just memorize a bunch of information so that you can regurgitate it later, but you don't remember anything about that book. So we need to interact and spend a little bit more time with a book than just speeding through and writing down the main points. But that's the starting point. Where do we go from there? The next step is you're going to read the first sentence of each paragraph and then bounce to the next paragraph and then bounce from first sentence to first sentence over and over and over again. You know, if the author gives you bold statements to write down, write those down. If they give you an end of chapter summary, write that down. But to get the substance, what you're doing is you're basically fast forwarding through the chapter by reading the first sentence. This method is actually a little bit of an ancient speed reading method that academics have used for several decades. I learned this when I was getting my master's of divinity, and there were some weeks that I would be given 200, 300 pages of text to read, and there was just no way that I could get through all of it. And so I was taught this method so that I could get kind of an overview. I could get the sky cam view of what I was reading so that I could at least get the main points of the concept without getting every piece of detail in there. All the stuff in between, it's not that it's not important, it's just probably non-essential. Giving that first paragraph, the first sentence of each paragraph, what it does is it allows you to get an overview of the text without having to read every word. So you're reading the first sentence, and then what you're doing is you're fast forwarding over the rest. You're fast forwarding the non-essential content. I kind of think of it like if you're watching a football game back that you didn't get to see live and you recorded it, the football game recording is probably 3.5, 4 hours long because of halftime, because of commercial breaks, because of huddles. Do you need to watch all 4 hours of the football game to get the essence of the game? No. You probably only need to see about 20 to 25 minutes of the entire game to see all of the important parts, because it's all of the stuff between the plays that doesn't really matter. You can watch all of it, but you can actually see the essence of the game by just fast forwarding to play after play after play. That's kind of what we're doing. We're taking that same methodology and we're applying it to reading. Okay, so to recap, you're looking for bold statements, you're looking for end of chapter summaries, and then you're bouncing from first sentence to first sentence to first sentence. That's the flow of how you walk through a book like this, and you could actually get the main points of this book in less than an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on how diligent you are with it and how long the book is. But you can get the main concepts, the main wisdom of it by just spending a little bit of time with it. So you're still getting it's still worth every dollar you paid for it, right? If you paid $25 for the book and you only read 20% of it, is that still worth the money? Well, yeah, it is if you got the main points out of it, but it might not be worth 8 to 10 hours of your time. So that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to get our time back by changing the way that we read. All right, so that's the flow of how we walk through this book. But like I said, there's two parts to our goal. There's gaining wisdom, and then there's retaining wisdom. And that's just as important, because if you just fast forward through a book and you write down a bunch of main points and never think about it again, what good is it? Nobody cares. You're not going to impress your friends if you say you did that. What matters is that you're retaining it, that you're remembering what you said. And this next part is the part I get really excited about, because this is the part when I show my friends how I do this and how I actually remember what I read and what I wrote down. They kind of perk up because they realize, okay, this is actually the real deal. This is something that could actually work. So in this next section, what I'm going to show you is how in the world you remember the main concepts of a book that you spent less than an hour on several years ago. So let's keep going along.